All right, welcome everybody to Getting Ready to Query. My name is Mary Kole. This is a Right on Con 2019 pre-launch event, and I am so excited to be here to be able to present to you. I'm actually, for the first time in many years, not doing a Right on Con event because they had so many great speakers lined up, and my availability didn't quite mesh with the weekend this time. So I am still super excited to be able to do something for Right on Con. I love the event. I know you will too. And I love that they're doing these sorts of presentations ahead of time to get everybody excited. Now, we are going to be talking about querying and submission, agent and publisher research, all of the super important things that I highly, highly advocate for before anybody presses the submit button on their manuscript. And it's also a topic that every writer is very, very curious about. They want to see the payoff for their hard work naturally. But there are many important decisions that you have to make at this point. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how you do that. So I am going to fuss with the tech a little bit because I have a slideshow, a PowerPoint presentation. If things look funky for just a minute, you may have to bear with me, but I am going to go ahead. You are going to see the Right on Con logo for a second, and then I'm going to toggle into my slideshow. So without further ado, we are going to get started with that. Now I'm going to go into slideshow mode. Okay, and I'm going to trust, now that I don't have any feedback from the streaming webinar software, I'm going to trust that it's working. Maybe if our lovely moderator Lisa wants to unmute herself and confirm that she can see the slide, that would be super duper helpful.
We are good.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And everybody, thank Lisa for her hard work. She's moderating a lot of these events and helping everything run smoothly behind the scenes, including the Q&A that we'll be doing. So I'm going to talk for a while along these slides. Then I'm going to come back with my face, and my face is going to answer some questions. So if you are on the registration page for this event, my understanding is you can leave some questions there, and Lisa's going to pull through all the submissions and get some questions lined up. And for the last 15 minutes or so of the presentation, I will be focusing on those. So if you have burning submission, literary agent, query letter, I know everybody has query letter questions, publishing house, research, those sort of questions, I would love to field some of them. And this, again, is Getting Ready to Query. Now, who am I to be talking to you today? I have over 10 years of experience in publishing. I have worked at Chronicle Books, Andrea Brown Literary Agency, which is children's specific for the very most part, and Movable Type Management in New York and San Francisco. Now I have been dragged to Minneapolis, kicking and screaming by my lovely husband. We did survive the polar vortex, but since I did not leave my house pretty much all week, it was a balmy 70 degrees in my environment. And for the last 5 years, I have been working directly with writers as a freelance editor with Mary Kole Editorial. So that's a little bit about me. I have deep experience in the traditional publishing system. And so I am uniquely qualified to speak on the topic of literary agent and publisher submission. I am also the author of Writing Irresistible Kidlit. The ruckus you hear are my two pug dogs. They have about half an hour of activity per day when they're not sleeping. And unfortunately, they have chosen their half an hour to coincide with this presentation. So I'm going to try and do something about it, but I concentrate around them all the time. So Writing Irresistible Kidlit is my book specific to writing middle grade and young adult. It has a lot of craft advice on characterization, plotting, and some market and submission advice there too. So that's out from Writer's Digest Books. And without further ado, Getting Ready to Query. So in this workshop. Today, we are going to talk about how to think about agent and publisher submission, why it's important, how to do that research, that all important research. I'm hoping to really sell you on the research experience and why it's so crucial. The top 5 slush pile mistakes, which a lot of people are very, very eager to learn, and what are agents and publishers actually looking for, and how to improve your odds. So a lot of really exciting sounding buzzwords that hopefully will keep everyone engaged. And then, of course, that Q&A portion. That was me leaving for a second to go get a spray bottle to try and break these two up. All right, so thinking about submission. This seems like a very strange topic to go into, but believe it or not, submission is not just a one layered consideration. Everybody wants to be published, but published is different across the board. And not a lot of writers kind of think in those terms. So I wanted to plant some ideas for you. What is your goal? Everybody is going to have kind of the same goal of getting their work out there, but what that looks like is actually completely different from project to project, from writer to writer. So just saying being the next J.K. Rowling is nice, but since there's only one of those, and she already exists, that kind of goal will unfortunately break your heart. There's a lot more nuance to the topic of being published than just, ooh, I want to take over the world, right? Great goal to have, not realistic. So instead, let's bring it down to earth. What is your project? You have to kind of, you have to look at yourself a little bit. Take a step outside yourself and look at your project, look at yourself. Try to consider where your project actually fits and who can help you. The choices that you make now are very, very, very important because they're going to guide how you approach the whole submission process. And the one-size-fits-all approach, it doesn't work because every project is different, every writer is different, every sensibility is different. And some projects really will benefit from a large publisher. Some projects will actually benefit from either a smaller press or being independently published. It can sometimes even vary on a project-to-project basis. So what I really want to plant in your mind with this slide is that not every submission is the same. Not every path to publication is the same. You also have to consider who you are because you are a huge part of the equation in the submission process. Are you all business or do you want to be guided and shepherded through the publishing process by a partner? There are some writers I know who are like, my agent and I only talk when I have a project for them. And then I'm like, sell it and call me to, to talk numbers. And some people really want a literary agent or a publisher who's more of a partner, who can sort of guide them through things, who can answer questions, who can be philosophical with them. Believe it or not, there are all kinds of people out there, and you only you can know where you fit on that spectrum. So the other decisions that you have to make as you approach the submission and research process in terms of finding a literary agent or publisher are, do you care about clout and name brand, or could you care less? Are you just looking for the right partner, or do you want the best of the best, the top of the top, and only the most reputable agent in the country will do? That all comes down to your sensibility and your priorities. Do you want a gun for big success, or are you more confident in a niche approach? Sometimes a smaller publisher, a regional publisher, a more specific publishing path are actually going to serve you and your project better. And do you want to find a home for one project, or are you gearing up for a writing career? At the same time, do you want a relationship with just one agent, just one publisher? Or are you interested in working in multiple categories where you can foresee yourself jumping around a little bit? For example, do you write cookbooks and picture books? Those are two completely different things. And do you want to try and place both? So you have to look at what you've done. You have to look at who you are. And this goes back to the project. Not every book has massive worldwide bestseller appeal for ages 0 to 100, and that's okay, actually. Your book may have a great life with a small press, even self-published. See, I talk ahead of myself, and so sometimes I make the point already, and then the slide says it, so I apologize. The more you research the market, which we'll talk about in a second, the more you will start to see what the market is and where you might fit. Because again, that one size fits all, I just want to be published. I want everyone in the world to read my book. You'll start to see that those ideas are a little bit less than realistic. So the one thing I would caution you about, if you are doing your research and you see that nobody has ever done anything like your project before, that may not necessarily be a selling point because there might be a reason. So my favorite example that I trot out at all the public speaking I've done for the last 10 years is you can absolutely write a 500-page picture book. You can go wild, knock yourself out, whatever floats your boat. Now, finding a publishing partner for a 500-page picture book is going to be infinitely more difficult, even if you say, well, nobody's ever done anything like this before. That's probably because demand is low or somebody tried and it didn't work, spectacularly didn't work. So just something to keep in mind there. Now, why research? There are hundreds of literary agents and publishers in the United States alone, and most of them have some kind of slant or angle or specialty. When you figure out who you are and what your project is, those two very, very important pieces of the puzzle, you're much more likely to start to figure out who exactly can help you on your path. And that is where research comes in. Because if you send your project to everyone in the known world who has a connection to book publishing, you are not setting yourself up for success, in my estimation. My strong argument is for working smarter, not harder. So some of you are going to be stressing out taking notes during this presentation. I have a lot of these resources listed on my website, which is Kidlit, Kidlit, as in kidliterature.com. There is a tab that says resources for writers, and you will find a lot of these links there. If you don't feel like scribbling and it's the weekend, take a load off. You can find a lot of the same information on my website, just FYI. So we do a lot of tracking websites now that help make the agent research game easier. Agent Query, Query Tracker, these are all searchable databases. You can search by your area of concentration, find out who's open to queries. You will absolutely, and I will get to this in just a second, you will absolutely want to corroborate the information you find on these third-party websites with what the agent is actually doing, or if they're open to queries on their website, they are going to be your best and most current source of information. But Agent Query and Query Tracker are great because they filter agents by specialty, and so you can easily whittle down some names and find some agents that you may not have heard of by using those resources. Now, I recommend, if you are going to use one agent research resource ever, and I have no financial stake in recommending this, it's publishersmarketplace.com. It costs $25 a month to be a member. Now, there is no long-term contract, and I would highly, highly recommend just signing up for a month, quitting after that month of research. It is the most comprehensive database of deals that agents are currently making to which publishers, what kind of books they're selling, which categories they're working in. Now, why do you have to pay for this if I just showed you two searchable databases? You want to make sure that the agents you're targeting are actually making sales. Anybody can hang a shingle out and say, I'm a literary agent, I can help you, send me your stuff. There's only one certifying body that sort of regulates the literary agent trade. That's the AAR, the Association of Author Representatives. But it's kind of the Wild West. And a lot of people, unfortunately, do prey on writers who aren't legitimately involved in the publishing industry. And, they say, oh, I charge a reading fee or whatever. Again, if a literary agent ever asks for money for anything, they are not likely to be legitimate. So anybody can hang a shingle out and say, I'm an agent. A lot of agents strike out on their own. A lot of new agencies form and then close just as quickly. Publishers Marketplace tracks deals. They track sales. Before you send to just any agent, if it were me, I would want to know that they're actually selling books. They're doing what I hope they will do for me. And so that's why Publishers Marketplace is such a great resource, because you can see, okay, when the rubber hits the road, are they actually making deals? And that's kind of their job. So it's invaluable. You can rank the top agents for thriller, for example, the top agents for middle grade. You can see which publishers they're working with. If you really want to work with Chronicle books, are there agents that sell a lot to Chronicle books, for example? It's just the coolest resource. And honestly, everybody in publishing hangs out on this website. It's like a gossip rag for everybody in the industry. So it is a really heavy duty tool that I would recommend everybody use. And $25 for that kind of thing is a very, very small investment for what it could give to your research process. There are books like Guide to Literary Agents and Writers Market. For children specifically, they make one children's writers and illustrators market. These are updated every year from Writer's Digest. And agents need to find talent, so they make themselves very available online. They have interviews, Twitter, social media. These can flesh out your research process, but I would also look at their kind of more professional accomplishments as well. And then finally, for every agent you're seriously considering, you need to look at their agency website. That is where they'll have their most current wish list, how they prefer to be contacted. We'll talk about kind of submission guidelines in a bit. And a lot of agents sometimes go closed or open to queries. And that's information that you definitely need before you query them, because it could be that they've gone closed to queries and none of the other websites sort of reflect that. So definitely corroborate with, from the horse's mouth information on the agency website. And then finally, you can also meet agents at conferences and events. That is the more resource intensive way to research people. But that's really a way to see the agent in action, see them in person, get a kind of read on their personality that you may not from a well-crafted agency profile online. But obviously it can be prohibitively expensive and also a big drain on your time. I would recommend everybody go to conferences and events, but it's not the most efficient way to do research necessarily. And there's also one more resource that's really helpful. That's Manuscript Wishlist. It's a website and also a Twitter hashtag, because agents will often post kind of off the cuff, oh, I would love an alien middle grade. And this is a website that sort of collates that information for you, so you can have some really up to the minute data on what people might be looking for. And that might be a cool way to make a love connection where you wouldn't otherwise know that they had that preference. Alternately, a lot of writers want to approach publishers directly, and I'll talk about that in just a second. There are publishers that are accepting unsolicited or unagented submissions. Now, Harper, Penguin, Random House, those are not going to be the types of publishers that take submissions directly from writers. They work exclusively with agents. They are called closed houses, unless you meet an editor from one of the closed houses at an event and they open themselves up to submissions. But again, that's a really expensive way to get maybe one foot in the door at Penguin Random House, if you have to fly out to another state for a conference to do it. So that wouldn't probably be my first choice. But there are a lot of smaller and medium-sized houses that still accept unagented submissions, and a lot of writers submit either to agents or to publishers directly or to both, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And this is also an avenue for you to pursue, because sometimes writers do find success going the direct-to-publisher submission route. A lot of the resources are the same. Publishers Marketplace traffics mostly with the big publishers, but you can find some medium publishers, some smaller presses on there. You can find new names, basically, is what you use Publishers Marketplace for in this scenario. The Writers Market books also have big sections on publishers that do want to hear from writers directly, and that's why those books are really, really valuable. Going to look at books the publisher has published. You can research which presses accept unsolicited submissions and then kind of look at their lists, go to their websites. Sometimes the websites are broken into imprints. Smaller publishers sometimes only have one imprint, but sometimes they do different things. So you want to see, oh, maybe they have a horror imprint or a fantasy imprint that I could target. So a lot of kind of on the ground, from the horse's mouth research into the publisher website would behoove you here. And you may not find as much information about individual editors, though. A lot of publishers that do hear from writers directly, they keep a slush pile, and you're writing to someone like acquisitions editor or submission editor, just somebody generic. And usually, to be honest with you, interns read the submissions. So for submissions directly to publishers, you're probably going to just get a generic instructions from the publisher's website for how to submit, but you're not going to maybe find as much information as you would from, or rather about literary agents. Literary agents tend to be a lot more out there and knowable and researchable than individual publishing house editors. And then again, of course, there's the conference. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little froggy, but the conference and event route, if you do run into editors from publishers, conferences are a great way to meet them because usually conferences bring literary agents and publishing house editors together. And the bonus there is you may be able to access a closed house through a submission period that's extended as a result of a conference or event. Now, here's that question that I touched upon. Can I submit to both? Do you want to send your submission maybe to a handful of literary agents and maybe to some publishers that you found that may be able to take you and offer a contract directly? Yes. It's technically, I don't know if it's illegal, but not really illegal. Nobody's going to come arrest you. But, this used to be kind of bad form. But realistically, I'm going to level with you. The odds of overlap are very, very low. Unfortunately for type A people like myself, publishing moves very slowly. So if you have interest in either being agented or potentially being picked up independently by a smaller medium house that keeps a slush pile, I say why not? But again, you have to go back to that earlier question of like, who are you? What's your sensibility? What's your project? If you're only going to be happy with a literary agent and gunning for a big house, then don't submit to small publishers. You're not going to make yourself happy doing that. But if you're like, well, I'm open to seeing what happens, so I'll submit to agents and publishers, and a smaller house is a-okay with me, then this might be a route that you take. Do research on both. If you do get simultaneous interest from an agent and a publisher, communicate this to all parties. They will work together if they know about one another. The only caveat here, the only way you could get into real trouble if you submit to both simultaneously is if you get so excited to receive a publishing offer and a publishing contract independently that you just say, yes, absolutely, I don't care what the paper says, let's do it. And then you try to target agents. Well, the agent's going to say, you've accepted all the terms already. There's nothing for me to do. This deal doesn't look as attractive to me because I can't negotiate. I could have gotten you much better terms if you just hadn't accepted in a knee-jerk reaction all the terms that the publisher gave you. So that's something to keep in mind. You can absolutely say to an agent, hey, I have interest. I'm going to acquisitions at Chronicle. I just want you to know that, and can we move forward under that circumstance? Because the agent will have their own ideas for how they want to pitch your project around. And if you're going to acquisitions at a house already, it may excite the agent, but it may kind of put a damper on their enthusiasm. So that's something to know. And for the publisher's side, you need to tell them, hey, I'm also querying around to agents, so I may get representation before we can talk about this contract. Both will understand, but that's, again, on the very, very slim chance that you get interest from both simultaneously. But that's the only scenario in which the submitting to both can get kind of squiffy. With that being said, it's not a bad strategy if you have genuine interest in either being agented or potentially finding your own publisher. So, data to look for when you do research. Have these people represented or published a book that's similar to yours? The only thing to watch out here for here is that it's not too similar. They won't want to cannibalize their own list. So, for example, if you have a really, really strong fantasy manuscript, somebody who represents a lot of the big fantasy writers, they may say, okay, this is too close to what I already have. So you kind of want to put on your analytical hat a little bit here. Have they said anything that makes you feel like they'd be a good fit for you? Be specific about what it is. This goes to the topic of personalizing your query letter. If you do find data in your research that makes your query sound more specific, absolutely use it. They pay attention to that when they're reading. And are they very interested or selling well in your category? You want people who are good at selling what you do. That's where publishersmarketplace.com, that paid resource, is so valuable. You want to make sure that they're selling in the category that you want to be sold in. Don't just look for anybody that's a warm body who claims to be a literary agent. That is the path to despair. Look for somebody who's going to be successful for you. That's working smarter, not harder, in my estimation. So your goal with all this research is to find an A list, a B list, and a C list of agents and or publishers to submit to. And I would recommend 10 to 15 names per each list. Your A list, those are your dream people. The B list, also interested. C list, maybe you know a little bit less about them, but they still seem promising. Then you find compelling details about each name or imprint to use in the query. The more personalized you can make your query, the better. Just don't say something like, I'm targeting you because of your love of children's books, because that is a form letter. Don't even kid yourself. They're going to know it. Everybody knows it. Make intelligent decisions rather than chasing anyone and everyone who might say yes. And remember that you may be working with these people for a while. So the decisions you make here really, really, really pay off down the road if you make smart decisions. I want to go back to this for just a second. You want to be submitting to one imprint at a publisher at a time for all of these lists. So let's say your A list, and critically, one agent at an agency at a time. So your A list cannot have 5 people from Writer's House on it. That is, for the submitting to publishers and agents at the same time thing, I was like, oh, sure. Yeah, you can fudge the rules a little bit. This is one rule that you do not want to break. So now slush pile mistakes. Number 1, not doing research. Sending to an agent who doesn't rep what you've written. Not personalizing the query because you're sending to every agent under the sun. Sending to every agent at the agency all at once. See, I told you, I get ahead of myself. Not putting time and care or attention into the process. I'm guessing that you've spent a lot of time and care and attention on the actual manuscript. At least I would hope so. And so I really want to sell you in this 50-minute presentation on the idea that the research is just as important and deserves the same amount of TLC. Now, not following guidelines. Those guidelines are there for a reason. They're to set you up for success. That's why you need to check every agent website that you are targeting, every publisher website that you are targeting. You want to know exactly how to reach these people on their terms because they set those terms up for a reason. A big no-no is sending attachments. 99% of people won't even take them. A lot of people have moved to forms where they streamline the process for you and you have to fill out a form, and they've set it up that way to help you succeed. It's not a hassle. It is something that will potentially pay off for you. But email attachments are still very much frowned upon. Using the wrong email subject, the wrong email address. A lot of agents keep special email addresses for their submissions and special email addresses for correspondence with people that they know. If you find their more professional email address, don't use it. You're going to end up in an inbox where they're not expecting you, and that's not like a clever workaround. That's going to seem like a pain in the butt to them. So use the email address that they provide for submissions and you'll end up in the right place. Like I said, these tools are there for a reason. Or trying to submit on Twitter or Facebook. People think that they're being clever, but the submission process is the submission process for a very good reason. And so I highly discourage trying to sort of like get in the back door with people because they don't want to be gotten that way. Writing a bad query letter. I could talk 4 hours about query letters. I do. This is unfortunately not the venue because our time together is so short. But I will share some resources at the end of this talk about queries specifically. So not getting the reader to care about your character. At the end of the day, that is the number one thing anybody looks for in a query letter. Not identifying your category or market clearly. You know, if you just submit, sorry, that was dog tags. If you just submit something and you call it a children's book, well, there are actually 7 or so categories within children's books that you could have chosen to be more specific. And it shows that you don't maybe really know the market. Making broad sweeping statements or editorializing about the merits of your own work. I just worked on a query with a client where the client had just a flowery paragraph about how great the book is. You really want to stay away from that. It does not communicate a sort of the right thing about how you're approaching the whole process. And agents and editors will want to be able to judge the thing for themselves. Of course, you think it's awesome. You wrote it. Ignoring potential sales hooks. This happens a lot in picture book and fantasy. You know, why is your fantasy world unique? There's so much fantasy in the slush pile. Why is your picture book about friendship unique? Does it have a great read aloud element? So find some sales hooks for your query letter. That's a really great way to stand out. And anything over 500 words for a query, really, really, really honestly, swear to you, is unnecessary. Making a bad impression, like I said, unrealistic comps. My book is The Da Vinci Code meets Harry Potter. I am so sorry to be the one to tell you it is probably not. And it's better that it's not because this kind of statement gets you laughed out of the slush pile. Putting the cart before the horse. This would make a great movie for Tom Cruise. Coming off as a jerk. This is my favorite one. You guys may not believe me, but when I maintained a slush pile, I saw all of this kind of skullduggery going on and more. Really, people actually do this. Usually this last one after a rejection. I've been called a moron, an idiot for not realizing just how amazing a project was. But basically, any iteration of the bestseller train is pulling out of the station, and I want you to get on board. Choo choo. Yeah, you don't want to do any of this. And then granting exclusives for no reason. A lot of writers think it's like the early decision process to college, where if you're really, really enthusiastic about a certain agent, you can extend an exclusive submission to them and they're going to fall all over themselves and offer representation based on that. But that is not how it works. It does nothing for you. So only grant exclusives if you've had a lot of back and forth with the agent or publisher. If they've offered revision notes, they want to see an exclusive submission from you based on their revision suggestions. That is a legitimate reason to have an exclusive with someone. Some agents or publishers require exclusives, which I think is very annoying. It's up to you if you want to submit to them. You're welcome to then submit widely if the period lapses and you haven't heard back. Like some agents will say, I need to see something exclusively for 3 weeks. If you submit to them, give them the 3 weeks, but then 3 weeks and 1 day, you're back out there. Granting exclusives for no reason gives you nothing. And the agent publisher, the total advantage, they can sit on your work. But you may end up wasting time if you grant a lot of exclusives. So I wouldn't. A lot of people expect simultaneous submissions, so just mention it in your query and then you're good to go. And then finally, you know, our time here is brief, unfortunately. I could talk about this for ever, but we do have to wrap up the presentation piece. So what do agents and publishers actually want? This is going to be disappointing, but true. Good stuff done well. Yeah, I know, clobber me. This seems like such a stupid thing to say, but This really is what it boils down to. Very solid writing skills. This is your top stock in trade. If you have errors, you will be rejected. Agents and editors see maybe 20,000 submissions a year, depending on the categories that they represent. And if your manuscript is riddled with proofreading errors, don't expect somebody to be forgiving on that front. This is a writing gig, basically. So if the manuscript itself is not up to snuff, I'm sorry. Do better. Good storytelling. Get other eyes on your project and ask your beta readers, your critique group, even a freelance editor if you're making an emotional impact. That is often more important than literary firepower. Believe it or not, like readers just want to care. They want to feel. That's what agents and editors are looking for too. So, emotional impact should really be at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about storytelling and specific categorization. Having an audience in mind is a good thing and doesn't mean you're a sellout. Writing to target a specific reader is a strong choice when you think about saleability. The publishing industry, whether you like it or not, or whether it's good or not, or virtuous or whatever, is split up into categories. And so if you keep that in mind, don't be a slave to the market, but be aware of it. That makes you savvy. And finally, a nice person to work with. You can have an artistic temperament. That's what makes for great art. But you also want to come across as savvy, realistic, and easy to work with. That bestseller choo choo person is probably not going to see a publishing deal in their lifetime if that's how they're behaving in the slush. The entire submission process is a chance to show off your work, but it's also an audition for you and how you might function in a business relationship. And publishers want a writer who will collaborate and revise and can help promote the book if the publisher takes it on. So the best people come across as hardworking, easygoing, tenacious. These are the type of writers that agents and editors gravitate toward. And then how to improve your odds. This is the boil down point of this entire talk. Submit to your small, targeted lists of agents and publishers. This is where your research is really going to pay off. Collect responses without jumping to conclusions. Yes, this is extremely difficult to actually do, but don't jump on every piece of feedback as soon as it comes in. Do your submission round, get the feedback you're going to get, and then see how you want to proceed and see if any themes emerge in the sort of feedback you're getting. Consider the feedback and revise accordingly. Keep an open mind. Collect yourself and submit again if needed. If you didn't get anything out of your A list, uh, see how it went. Go to your B list, then go to your C list. It needs to be a process. Instead of sending 150 queries on one day, I really, really advocate for this kind of slow, concerted effort, very strategic approach. And I really do believe that that's how a lot of writers are going to find success. So, speaking of which, I have to make a pitch for the manuscript submission blueprint, which just launched last week. It is a 10-hour online class on the research, query, and submission process based on my experience as a literary agent with advice, interviews, sample query letters. You can see what other people are doing and what has been successful for other writers, handouts. There's a bit.ly address down there, bit.ly manusub. If you want to check it out, I think it's such a wonderful, wonderful project that I'm so proud to have been a part of. It was over a year of hard work on my part to put this class together for you. And I'm really, really excited to finally be able to share it all about this process that I've been talking about. So if you like what you heard here, you can have 10 times more of it. Lucky ducky with the manuscript submission blueprint. I also have upcoming webinars that I do. And I'm taking a break for February because I'm doing this webinar, but then I'm back to my regularly scheduled programming about writing character in March. Writing an irresistible query. This one is a paid webinar, but it does come with a critique of your query letter. Writing irresistible voice in May. And then in June, first pages for all of you novelists. And I also, as I mentioned, provide editorial services. You can learn more at Mary Kole. I do everything from consulting, query letter edit, and developmental editing for full or partial manuscripts. You can always reach out if you have any questions. There's a form on the website. There are all my social media details. I'm going to leave this up for a hot second, and then I'm going to do Q&A with our remaining time. And I do apologize. I warned Lisa, our wonderful moderator, that I do try to pack a lot into these things. I talk pretty quickly, but I believe that is how to make the most of the hour that we have together. Okay, so that's enough of that. And now here I am. All right. Let's see here. Yes. So I have a question already from Krista. She asks, is shorter sweeter when it comes to queries? Yes. One of my big slush pile mistakes was the over 500 word query letter. And yes, the shorter, the better. I would even say 500 is to make those of you who have very long queries feel better. But ideally, you would be at 350 or so words. So picture books, you can do significantly shorter, maybe even 200 words. Because with picture books, a lot of the time you are actually pasting the entire manuscript below. So the agent, if they're interested, can just cut right to that. So the query letter really should focus on the pitch for the story, any sales hooks, your writing experience if relevant, and then just get them excited to read the project, which they can do immediately. So the shorter, the better. For query letters, if anything doesn't need to be there, and that includes talking at length about your themes, editorializing about how great the project is, jokes about your cats in the bio paragraph. We all love cats. Look, it's publishing, but if there's anything that you can whittle, a stronger, shorter, tighter query letter, I'm going to say is almost always better. Let's see here. Jenny. And see, that was a short and sweet answer. I am not good at those usually. So thank you for setting me up for success, Krista. Jenny, how do you know whether to keep going on queries when you're getting rejected without much feedback? Okay, two things there. The first thing is that it has become a market reality now that people are just so inundated with submissions that they don't have it's just not realistic for them to be able to respond. Even when I was agenting and I stopped in 2013, I tried the best that I could to send more personalized feedback. If anything in a project grabbed me, I'm not saying this to say how much of a saint I was. I'm saying this to say that even 5 years ago, this was a much more common practice. Now, unfortunately, a lot of agents and publishers have gone to a no word is a rejection, meaning they don't even respond unless they're interested, or just all form rejections if it's not an enthusiastic response. So writers are getting frustrated. I hear this in my editorial practice all the time. Writers are getting frustrated because they're not hearing much of anything on their submissions. So that could indicate that the market is just very, very busy. People are responding with less and less personal information to writers. It could also indicate, unfortunately, a problem with the manuscript. I would say if you are getting no responses, if you're getting no traction, no personalized feedback, at least get into a critique group type of situation, get a beta reader, get some additional eyes on the manuscript. Writers cannot see their work for what it is. They cannot see the flaws in their work like a second set of eyes. That makes my career as a freelance editor possible, but it's very, very true. We just don't see our work in the same way that another reader would. You just want to make sure that the person that you choose for a critique partner is somebody whose opinion you trust and they kind of have something to back up their opinion. Another writer is good, somebody who reads a lot, a librarian, just somebody who can give you better feedback than just like, oh, it's great, or I didn't like it. Like, that's not going to be helpful for you. People who can point to specific things in the character, the plotting, the writing style that worked for them, didn't work for them, and why. That why is important to look for. Unfortunately, it's kind of the Wild West when you're trying to find critique partners because it's just other people and other writers usually. So try and find somebody that you trust and somebody who can back up their expertise somehow. A lot of people do hire freelance editors. That's, again, how my career is possible. But I would say if you're getting rejected all over town, you're not hearing a lot of specific feedback. That does point to at least something potentially being off in the submission itself. Do yourself a favor, get another set of eyes, get another opinion on the project that might help inspire a revision, whether it's from a beta reader, a critique partner, or a freelance editor who is somebody that you pay for their professional opinion. Um, do another revision, maybe gear up, submit again the revised manuscript. Um, and if you're still getting kind of exactly the same responses, maybe it's time to put this particular manuscript aside, get working on something else. Uh, the thing is, it's not dead. You can always resurrect the file, open it back up again, try revising. Actually, when you put something away for a series of months, you see it with new eyes yourself. So that could be a great way to kickstart some revision. But yeah, I would get outside feedback however you can. If it's not able to come from editors or literary agents, do one more revision, maybe one more submission round, and then put it away and work on something new. Because the great thing about being passionate about writing, about doing things like this, is you're always learning. Every time you sit down to write, you're learning. Every time you revise, you're learning something new. And so the writer you're going to be in 6 months is very different from the writer you are now. And so if you put something away for 6 months and then you come back to it, you may have a breakthrough for how to approach that project. And it may not be all over for that project. But that being said, if you're not getting anything from the submission process, either there's something wrong with the manuscript, or maybe you're going out too early. And then kind of additional feedback is what I really, really recommend. And then Susan. So my question is, what is the best method of selecting the person you should send your query to? So the research process is really going to give you a lot of information. And sometimes you're going to find 2 agents at an agency. Remember, you can only send to one. You have to choose. Who sound amazing, who sound like they'd be perfect. How do you kind of go further and drill deeper and make those decisions? At the end of the day, you're not going to know how they're going to react to your project until you actually send it to them. So all the research in the world is only going to take you so far. You're making an educated guess, which is why you want as much data as possible. But the person that you think is perfect for your submission might reject you anyway, because they are their own person. They've communicated themselves clearly online. Maybe they've written a bio. They may have put something on manuscript wish list that sounds exactly like your project. They might still pass on it because they are their own person. So at the end of the day, research takes you very, very far, but then you just have to submit and you have to let that person actually speak to whether or not they're interested. And that's kind of, you want to be as prepared as possible, but then you have to actually do the submission and hear the feedback, if any is forthcoming. So I would say to Susan and everybody wondering kind of in this vein, you do the best that you can, and you want to make sure that you do a lot of hard work. But then you do want to press send at the end of your research process and see what happens. And that's kind of that nerve-wracking, wonderful, horrible part of the submission process. This is a great question. It didn't come with a name, but what is the best way to approach a query letter when your novel is dual perspective? Yes. So every time that you have a narrative quirk to your project, you want to be as upfront in the query as humanly possible. For example, there was a book written entirely in the second person direct address, which is the you. The book was called You. Um, uh, in that query letter, I bet that writer put right at the top, this is written in the second person. So if anything that you're doing is unique or noteworthy about your project, you really want to put it kind of, I call it the logistical part of the query, where you say, my book is fantasy. This is the title. This is the word count. YA. You know, all the kind of like specs of your project usually are formatted at the very top of the query or after the query meet. And I would put, this is written in dual point of view. And then for the query meet, the actual description of the story and the different characters, how I would do dual perspective is I would do one paragraph from that centers on the first point of view character. And then I would do one paragraph that centers on kind of introducing the conflict and what's going on for the second point of view character. And then I would do the third paragraph. And these can be shorter paragraphs. You're probably going to end up with a longer query if you have multiple protagonists to introduce. And then I would do the third paragraph where how they weave together and focus more on plot in that paragraph. So off the top of my head, that would be kind of my formula for a dual point of view. And we have time for one more question. I'm going to read it here. This is from Carolyn. Any tips for staying sane while on submission, aside from working on something new? How often do you like to hear from your agent? That second piece of the question, I am not sure if I understand. But how do you stay sane in the and Carolyn, if you want to email me, mary@kidlit.com to clarify that second part of the question, I'm happy to field it kind of off the hangout. Staying sane on submission, working on something new, Carolyn. Thanks for taking the rug out from under my response. But working on something new really is kind of the best tool that you have up your sleeve, because if you do land an agent, they're gonna also want to know, you know, is this a one project writer, or do they have other ideas? So they will ask if you are working on something new. It also keeps you creatively engaged and moving forward on something. Being on submission can feel like you're at a total standstill and you're in complete limbo. It is very emotionally grueling, which is why Carolyn asked the question. So if there's any area in your writing or creative life where you feel like you could be making forward progress, it is on a new project, because this project is kind of the one that's on submission feels very much like it's up in the air. Other than that, we are human beings with human nature. We all have our coping mechanisms, whether those are wine or chocolate. I would recommend that. But I would also recommend reading. A lot of the time when writers are very deep in the writing process, the revision process, or the submission process, they tend to neglect sort of poking their heads up and looking around at what else might be going on in the publishing industry. While you're on submission, you can completely switch gears and read some of those books that have been piling up. I know I have like 70 piles. They're organized in a way that makes sense only to me, of books that I've been meaning to read and neglecting because I'm so busy. So read, see what other people are doing. If you're bored with your category, if you've only been reading middle grade fantasy because you're working on middle grade fantasy, read something else. These are the peers that you hope to join one day. And seeing what they're up to, seeing them at the peak of their craft, that can be hugely inspirational and also really reassuring. These people have made it. It's possible to make it. So for what it's worth, kind of keep plugging along whatever track makes the most sense to you, whether that's a new project, whether that's reading. Yeah. So that's time for us. This was a whirlwind. I hope it was fruitful. I hope you got something out of either the presentation or the Q&A. I'm so happy to be part of Write On Con, and I know you're going to have a great conference next weekend. And anybody who wants to reach out to me, I'm very accessible online at kidlit.com, marykole.com. That's Kole with a K. That's my editorial services website if you want a little bit more one-on-one advice about your project specifically. And thank you so much for coming to hang out with me. I love doing these things, and I am just so happy to share my expertise. So have a great con next weekend, and enjoy the rest of the events that they have lined up for you. And I'm sure